Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the Fuller Cemetery, located in the community of Ludlow, Massachusetts. So tell us about the Fuller Cemetery in Ludlow.
All right, this is a cemetery. Obviously it was named after the Fuller family because they were one of the pioneer families of Ludlow itself. So today we're talking about this wonderful place, its history, where it's near, and then what the layout of the old cemetery, how it's changed through the years, and then what's around it, because it's not a separate cemetery from all other things. It's very close to the Ludlow Center Green, and has memorials there, and has churches and meeting house around. So there's a lot of talk about this little place. And so you want to know the history of the cemetery? Well, it's a very old cemetery, so you're going to find inside of it a lot of very old brownstones from the 1700s. And those are a wonderful sight to see, of course. Most of those very old ones are very close to their front gate. There's some back, and most of the old ones seem to be towards the right, near the church. Right, so you're going to see one double brownstone one. It's actually one cut, but of course this were a husband and wife team, and they both sides of it have different angel faces above. Right, and then the death day is 1786, and you're going to find a lot of these. This happens to be for the Wilder family. So you know this is back to the pioneer days. And this cemetery is, I think, the second oldest cemetery in Ludlow. The first is Sykes Cemetery, which is only itself 300 yards away. And then also there's another cemetery about 400 yards away, more to the south from this one, called the Ludlow Center Cemetery. So there's a lot going on around this street. And the best thing to do for the cemetery is just walk around, see some of the wonderful old stones. After the brownstone area goes into the marble era, you're going to see a deacon there, Stephen Jones. All right, and you're going to see many really interesting stones with beautiful epitaphs. And a lot of the Chapin family, of course, who not only settled in Springfield, they settled into Chicopee and Ludlow. So there'll be a lot of those around. A lot of the Pease family will be around. And you also get to see a lot of footstones, but they've been removed from the headstone area and put towards the back, and that's why we're talking about them much separately. Now, this is a true churchyard cemetery because the first meeting house and church in Ludlow was right alongside of it. That original one burned down about 20 years ago, and it has been replaced. But this is the real, true way that all old cemeteries started up in New England, right next to the churchyard.
And what is the church that is next to it?
Okay, now that is a replacement church. Don't let it fool you. They made it so nicely that it looks like a very old church, and it looks like the original that was there. Okay, so that beautiful church was the start of what we call Ludlow, because every town, in order to become separate from the community that they belong to, in order to separate out, you need to have a meeting house, you need to have a church. And if you don't have one, the town won't let you go off on your own. And for that reason, there's a beautiful church. The back portion is an addition. Okay, and that addition was put in when they put the new church back in. The church itself is called the First Church. It's a congregational church. And the original, I think, was from 1780. And then that one was taken down. I think the replacement was put up about 1820. And then that one was burned down about the year 2000. And so what you have there now is a third edition and a modern replacement. But it keeps that good look of the churchyard cemetery next to the old-fashioned congregational church.
And really quick before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, for more information or to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. In there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, and his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what has happened to the footstones in the Fuller Cemetery?
Okay, they've been taken out, and where they've been put is against the back chain link fence, and they've been lined up there. At least they've been saved, which is wonderful. And there are a lot of them. Now, every pre-1850 burial in New England would have the big slab headstone. During the 1700s, it would have been brownstone. During the early 1800s, it would have been marble. And that would have pointed towards the inscription towards the west. The footstone would have been positioned at the foot of the burial, and the inscription on it would have been towards the east. Now, the body would have been positioned so the head of the deceased was near the headstone and the feet of the person next to the footstone, so that on resurrection day, the person could rise their upper torso upwards and see the resurrection in the east. Now, towards the back, I would say there's about maybe 25 footstones. Is that all? No, there probably should be about 100 pre-1850 burials, and so about 25 are saved. Now, within the body of the cemetery itself, you don't see many footstones around. What happens was the superintendent of the cemetery, probably from the era around 1880 to the year 1900, took the footstones out in order to make it easier to take care of the grass within the cemetery. And they were changing it towards what most cemeteries were becoming, and that was lawn cemeteries. The lawn cemeteries started coming around in the late 1850s, and a lot of old churchyard cemeteries changed their look. Now, even the stones themselves, they should be pointed towards a westerly direction, but someone has turned them all around, and now they point towards the road, which I think is I would call it a southeast by east direction. So they've been almost flipped around about 150 degrees. So it's great to see the footstones around, but I wish people had left the headstones in the right direction.
And what surrounds the cemetery area?
All right, many things, because it's in a very historic district. It's called the Ludlow Historic District. And the first meeting house of Ludlow is there, built in 1783 and 4. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. It's still there. It's been pushed back a little bit, so it's about maybe 200 feet away towards the north. All right, and in front of that is a Rood Memorial, R-O-O-D, a memorial to the Rood family put up by one of the sons. There's also that First Church of Ludlow. The second church, the first edition was probably put up in the 1780s. The second edition, I think it's from 1850s or so. But the one that's there now is a rebuild from the year 2000 or so, when they had a fire inside the church and it was totally lost, had to be rebuilt. Now, on the Memorial Green, that's on the other side of the road from the cemetery, you have a memorial to the Civil War deaths from men that enlisted out of Ludlow. And this is a beautiful memorial. It's an obelisk with the men's names on them, right? And so you find on it many, many names. And one prevalent death location for many of these men is Andersonville Prison in Andersonville, Georgia. That comes up 8 times. This is a prisoner of war camp that the South had, where it held the North of the men that had been captured. Most of the men in there in 1864 died of either starvation or of cholera, diphtheria, so forth. A lot of men from Ludlow died at that point. Now, there's other people, of course, here. Robert Parsons, who died in Maryland. Henry Pease, who died in Portsmouth, North Carolina. So forth and so on. And what I've done for you, out of all these many men, I think there's 16. 8 of them died in Andersonville and are buried there. And the other 8, I've also tried to find where they're buried, and I found 15 of the 16 burial locations. So you know exactly where they're going to be buried. A couple of the men have cenotaphs within Ludlow, so you can actually see their names within Ludlow, but they're probably buried elsewhere, usually in the southern states itself. So I hope you go and see this wonderful Fuller Cemetery.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again.